It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Rico Brogna. Welcome, everybody, to a brand new edition of the Rico. I can't believe it. I need to pinch myself. We are a week away from spring training, a week away from baseball starting to become just a bit more real. So, over the next few Rico Brognas, we will put kind of a finishing touch on this offseason, a few offseason Ricos that we need to accomplish before spring training begins. For example, the Pete Alonso tribute. He deserves one, but I also believe it's important to move on. I have done a terrible job of moving on, apparently. One of the big critiques I always get is, Evan, enough of Pete Alonso, enough of Pete Alonso. You're right. And so when we do the tribute to Pete Alonso, it'll be at least an opportunity to move on. Our final Rico rewatchable coming up in just a few days, the post 9/11 game, the Mike Piazza home run game, however you want to define it, against the Braves, and then a final kind of audit on this offseason, the good, the bad, how we feel about it going into spring training. And once spring training starts in a week, it's all about 2026. We'll hear from the manager, Carlos Mendoza. We'll have a big announcement on our return trip to spring training, and we'll obviously break down every aspect of the Mets, including our projected 26-man roster. As far as today's Rico is concerned, I like this one because we're going to hit on a variety of subjects. We call it the Rico 10. We've got 10 different Met-related subjects that we will hit over the course of this podcast, whether it's Carlos Beltran, whether it's the big miss I had on the beloved Mets that we lost on the last Rico. If you missed it, download it. You can take a listen. Whether it's some of the small additions the Mets have made and possibly the big addition they still may make. So we'll touch on all of that on this edition of the Rico. But let's hit topic number one, and it's one that's near and dear to Hoff's heart, and that is Eugenio Suarez signed a one-year contract with the Cincinnati Reds. And his reaction, and he wasn't alone, I think he represents a good portion of the Met fan base, which is why for everyone who gets mad at Pete, you're going to love Pete today. Because I'm not just going to sit here and tell you why, no biggie, I didn't want Suarez, he sucks. I'm not going to do that. You will get to hear a counterpoint. His reaction when Suarez signed with Cincinnati was to immediately text me. He didn't care about the show he produces because he doesn't have a name on it. So he figured, I'm not going to talk about it there. I'm not allowed to talk. Let me text Evan and tell him, where are we? How come we didn't sign Eugenio Suarez? Before I tell you why I agree with the Mets not signing Suarez, at least at this point of the offseason, Hoff, state your case on why you believe David Stearns and the Mets screwed up on this one and they should have signed Eugenio Suarez.
Because very simply enough, you have a guy who has proven to be a power bat throughout Major League Baseball, throughout his career. And it's a simple one-year deal, which is something that we know David Stearns is all about. It's $15 million, whatever the case is. He is a power bat. We've been looking for that true DH. This is an easy fit. You could still give Brett Beatty his at-bats in left field. You could still find a place for Mark Vientos at first base, when you're rotating Polanco around the diamond. You could find places for all these young at-bats, young batters that we're still want to see on a regular basis, and you have the professionalism of Eugenio Suarez. Plus, the fact is, he's actually played more first base than Jorge Polanco, who's the guy that they're dying to play at first base. He's actually recorded outs. He's got 6 innings worth of first base experience.
Yeah. I mean, it's not good experience. Like, one of the knocks on Suarez is that he's a butcher defensively. In fact, the reason I'm okay with not signing him is he is an older, more proven version of Mark Vientos. Right? Mark Vientos is the kind of player that could very well become Eugenio Suarez, a guy who bounces around the league, hits a lot of home runs, right-handed slugger, not really a good defender, but yes, he could play third base. Yes, he could play first base, but is mostly a DH. The difference is Vientos is a lot younger, and the jury is still out, good and bad. I mean, the floor on Mark Vientos is obviously lower. We saw that last year, but I could certainly argue based on his age and based on what he's already done for us, specifically in 2024, that the ceiling is higher. And I believe that if they signed Eugenio Suarez, Mark Vientos was done here. And if that's where you're at and Met fans are at, like, hey, I'm just done with the guy, then great, then it makes sense. I'm not. And I guess that's the disagreement. And what I'm willing to do at the start of this season, mostly a DH, but certainly a possibility of some first base, that's not my preference, is that Mark Vientos is going to get an opportunity to play. And if he hits and performs to the level of 2024, that's a boon for the New York Mets. And if he doesn't, if I'm wrong, and Mark Vientos is truly what he was last year, I believe that a player like Eugenio Suarez will be available at the trade deadline. And if that becomes a need, the Mets could pounce then. In fact, I'll go out on a limb here and tell you that Suarez will be traded at the trade deadline. That Cincinnati isn't going to have the year it had last year. It's not. It's going to regress. They're going to be an under 500 team. And when we get to August 2nd, because I think that's the deadline this year, it's not July 31st, either August 2nd or August 3rd, one of those days. It's a Monday, I can tell you that they're going to trade him. And so what may be funny about this whole conversation is you may get what you want. It just may happen at a later date. And to me, that's what I would want, because it at least offers Vientos the real chance to get at-bats early and at least prove there's something there with him. And I think if they sign Suarez, he's done here. Would you at least agree? If they sign Suarez, Vientos becomes basically useless at this point?
Yeah, but then I would expect there to be that counter trade, and that excites me because I'm assuming that would then be more towards pitching.
For what? The problem with Vientos right now is I don't think his value's at an all-time high. And so while I still think he's got a chance to be good, if they put him on the open market, what are we talking about? We saw what Jeff McNeil fetched, a 17-year-old.
Right, but did you ever think that it could get lower?
Well, it could. Look, it is on the table that Mark Vientos just doesn't perform. Like, I fully admit that. But I guess why I'm okay with it is I think that they can easily pivot. Obviously, there are many things that can change internally, whether it's young players performing, whether it's, like a great example is Brett Beatty. Now, if Brett Beatty, who I believe is going to get a chance to play a lot of left field and DH a little bit and play first base, if Brett Beatty tears it up, if Carson Bench tears it up, if Jorge Polanco adjusts to first base, Vientos may lose at-bats that way. And the Mets may not even need him. So there's an avenue where internally Vientos just loses at-bats, but there's also a potential avenue where Vientos performs. And he's a decade younger than Suarez. And I would rather take the risk on the younger, I don't even want to say cheaper, because that's not my problem. If they're willing to spend money, cool. The younger, higher upside version. And that's what Mark Vientos is. And so if they had signed Suarez, it would have been basically them throwing in the towel on Vientos. I am not ready to do it. Will I do it in May 15th? Maybe. I mean, it's possible. I'll come on a Rico and say I'm done with him, but I'm not done with him. And I think that's the difference you and I have about this subject.
And I can understand that, but I do have one question, because I feel like this is something that it's not just a David Stearns thing. This is we saw this with Billy Epler too, where they would wait till the trade deadline to make some significant move. Like they've had their team, they feel like it's good, it's ready to go. And then you see there's holes and they wait to fill it in August or end of July. But why not make your team better now?
I tell you why. Because there's a difference between, hey, this is such an obvious hole and you're holding out faith that it's not going to be a hole. And then there's the Mets situation, which is, hey, I really do think this can be internally filled. And I think between Mark Vientos proving 24 is more real than 25, and even Benj and Beatty, the killer bees, performing at a high level, there's an avenue where when we're sitting here on August 1st, we're not talking about adding a right-handed DH. That's very possible. And as I sit here today in early February, maybe I'm starting to get confident. Maybe I'm starting to believe spring's around the corner. I kind of bank that that's not going to be their biggest issue. But it does. Well, let's hope, right? You hope I'm right. This is one of those scenarios where you hope I'm right.
Someone's off to school. Say hi and bye. Hi and bye.
Hi, bye.
All right,
have a good day at school. Remember to listen. All right.
Yes.
That's Pete Hoffman's. Yes. That's Pete Hoffman's son making an appearance. That's what we've been doing lately. A lot of sons popping up on the Rico over the last couple of weeks. All right, Rico item number 2, and it is similar. It is about free agents that are still out there, and if the Mets should target them. Framber Valdez and Zach Gallen are both available. They're both very solid. They both have resumes that put them on, I would say, a touch below being an ace, but damn good starters in this league. But both guys have been unsigned. Now, both guys have kind of the same issue, which is that they've got the qualifying offer attached to them. So a couple of things here. There's the Evan, what would you do? And then there's the let's read the tea leaves on David Stearns. I have said this for a while with David Stearns. despite the recoup of a pick in losing Edwin Diaz, I find it really hard to believe that they're going to sign 2 qualifying offer free agents. They've already signed 1 in Bo Bichette. I just have a tough time imagining them doing it with Framber Valdez and Zach Gallen. And here's the other factor here, because I do think this is a factor, and this is where I stand. I would not sign either guy, and it doesn't mean either guy sucks. It doesn't mean you'd never have enough pitching, because obviously you never have enough pitching. But I view them very similarly to Suarez in that I have a rotation. I do. I have 6 guys, and we still don't have clarity. Maybe we'll get it from Mendoza when he meets the media next week in spring training. We don't have clarity on how they're deploying the 6 guys. But not only do they have 6 starting pitchers, certainly injuries could affect that. They've got a few, specifically Jonah Tong and Christian Scott, young arms that are ready to enter the rotation. And you could even throw Tobias Myers into that mix. So you're talking about 9 starters. And when I say 9 starters, I'm not including Justin Hagenman. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not including the ultimate depth guys. I'm talking about 6 real legitimate starting pitchers, all with resumes that, to me, earn a spot in a rotation. We can go through all that. And then 3 guys who are young, emerging pitchers, specifically Tong and Scott. Myers has already done it. I think the Mets will use him mostly in the bullpen, clearly. But that's 9 guys. And so the only way signing Zach Gallen or signing Framber Valdez would make sense is if you're trading one of the guys currently in your rotation. So let's go through it. They just acquired Freddie Peralta. They are not trading him. Clay Holmes, I'd be very surprised if they moved him. All right, so now we're 2 for 2. Nolan McLean, get a drug test if you think they're trading Nolan McLean or even want to trade Nolan McLean. Sean Manaea, his value has to be at an all-time low based on the lack of pitching last year, how ineffective he was, the age, the amount of money he's making. I get it. You can scream into the wind, they should trade Sean Manaea. They're not trading Sean Manaea. His value's at a very low level. David Peterson's the interesting one. Because if you ask me, of all the guys, of all 6 guys in the Met rotation, if you're going to subtract somebody because you want to add one of the pitchers we just talked about, the guy who probably has a good mix of value and I'm okay moving him would be David Peterson. He's coming off an odd year last year. We've debated this here on the Rico. It was mostly good. Then he fell apart final month and a half of the season. He is a lefty who has 1 year left of control. So if you trade him, you got to keep that in mind that the team acquiring him may be viewing him as a rental. I almost view David Peterson as a rental. Just knowing the history of David Stearns, knowing Freddie Peralta's a free agent, obviously the Tarek Skubal situation, I would assume David Peterson is not going to be re-signed. Like if I had to make that guess today, we record this on February 4th, 2026, I'd assume he's not here. So I do understand Peterson would be the name who makes the most sense. And then you've got Kodai Senga. And we've talked about this throughout the spring, or the winter, I should say. I wouldn't trade him, mainly because his value's at an all-time low. So the only way this makes sense, the Framber Valdez, Zach Gallen addition makes sense, to me, is if you trade David Peterson. And the return makes you feel comfortable that you've offset the pick that you're losing. And that's the only way it makes sense. Now, do I see the Mets doing that? Probably not. I'll tell you why. Zach Gallen and Framber Valdez, despite the market not opening up for them, they're going to make a lot of money. David Peterson is making $8 million. So you would be making, I'm going to guess that Gallen and Valdez are going to have to settle for short-term contracts. I don't know if it's a Michael King short-term contract. I'm not sure if it's just a one-year deal. I don't know what the makeup's going to be, but knowing what ends up happening to guys who have to settle for short-term deals, especially starters, like Jordan Montgomery a few years ago. And Zach Gallen is a Scott Boras guy, so we know that. They're going to make a lot of money. Like, you're talking $28 million a year, maybe more. So are you willing, and I know we assume there is no budget, but I assume at some point there is a budget, especially when you factor in the trade deadline. Are you going to invest an extra $17 million to get Valdez or Gallen over David Peterson, where I'm still convinced we haven't yet seen the best of David Peterson? So I get the appeal. I don't see it happening. Rico item number 3. The Mets did make some additions and some subtractions over the last week. They added former Dodger catcher Austin Barnes on an invitation to spring training, and they also officially lost Richard Lovelady, for the 500th time on a waiver claim. after he was designated for assignment. I am going to assume that Nicky Lovelady will come back at some point. I think he has now been released and signed about 5 different times. I look at the depth that the Mets have at catcher. And while Austin Barnes has a great reputation, he's not much of a hitter, we know that, but he's known for elite pitch framing. He's known for being like a glue guy. He's known for his relationships with pitchers. I think there's a great value to that. But I also like the Met depth at catcher. They've got 2 guys who are mortar locks to be on the team to start the year in Luis Torrens and Francisco Alvarez. I think Torrens is as good of a backup catcher as you'll see. And I think there's a scenario, and I hope this doesn't emerge as much as I like Torrens. There is a scenario where we're sitting here in May, June, talking about how Torrens should be the starting catcher. And we've had that discussion before. I heard Joe B say it the other day, and I get it. Like, hey, I don't trust Francisco Alvarez. That's fine. I would still give him the opportunity. Again, I know it's like the millionth opportunity, but he did show a lot of promise after he came back from the minor leagues and dealt with his injuries in the second half last year. But that's the factor, the injuries, because if he gets hurt, now you're looking at the depths, which is really Hayden Senger. And the thing about Hayden Senger is he kind of feels like a younger version of Austin Barnes. Like, he's not a hitter, not a great hitter at all. Neither has Austin Barnes been throughout his major league career, but he's young. He's a good defensive player. It seems like he's got good chemistry with the pitchers. So Austin Barnes feels like the kind of signing where he's here, he's in spring training, and it's a bad thing if he's on the major league roster because it means somebody got hurt. And right now, the big question around Francisco Alvarez is, can he stay on the field? Can he stay healthy? And if he can, maybe this is the year he puts it all together. And even if he doesn't, I like Luis Torrens as a fill-in catcher. Now, do I think he gets exposed if he plays every single game? He gets exposed to a certain extent. He's not a great hitter. Like last year, he had a lot of clutch moments, a lot of big moments. It's a part of why on our great episode of the Rico, I gave him an A. I think that was the only player I gave an A to. But every single day, I think it would become more obvious that he's not a great hitter. But if you look around baseball, how many catchers are great hitters? Like, it's not a big number. The key is, can you defend at a high level? And Luis Torrens can. So you've got that. All right, let's get to Rico item number 4. It is now official. Carlos Beltran is going into the Hall of Fame as a New York Met. And it's not a surprise when you look at his resume. It was really 2 choices for the Baseball Hall of Fame who ultimately makes this decision, and Carlos, the Kansas City Royals or the New York Mets. The numbers are very similar. The years played are very similar, but he's more remembered as a Met. Like, even though they only made the playoffs that one time in 2006, it was sort of epic, even if it ended in a bad way, and he was on contending teams in 2007 and 2008. So I think if you ask just the most basic baseball fan, hey, when I say Carlos Beltran, what team do you think of? Besides the Astros, for other reasons, it's probably the Mets. So it is the right decision. But this is very conflicting. I have been steadfast that it is so unique for the New York Mets to have a Hall of Famer who wears the Mets cap. Like, they've got a lot of guys who went to the Hall of Fame. Ricky Henderson went to the Hall of Fame. He's not wearing a Mets hat. Gary Carter went to the Hall of Fame. He's not wearing a Mets hat. Not a lot of guys do it. Pedro Martinez, Hall of Famer, not wearing a Mets cap. Until Beltran, we had 2 guys, Tom Seaver and Mike Piazza, 2 legends of our franchise's history. 2, without question, legendary Mets, number retired. You still see their jerseys worn. 2 guys that defined generations of Met baseball, different generations of Met baseball. So despite Mike never winning a World Series, which he didn't do, not necessarily his fault, they are, without question, above reproach, well-honored New York Mets. I like Carlos Beltran, always been a fan, always been a defender. I'm sure you can find me and Joe arguing about him back in 2007 or 2008. But he's not that kind of Met. He's just not. He's not Mike Piazza. He's not Tom Seaver. Like, when it comes to Piazza and Seaver, there are no debates. They're just great Mets, and we can sit around a campfire talking about legendary moments and ranking them. When it comes to Beltran, it's a debate. It's a debate of, is he defined by 2006? It's the strikeout. It's the debate of, was he clutch? It's the debate of, did he ever really want to be here? There's so many things about Carlos Beltran's Met legacy, and this is all before the managing stuff or the non-managing stuff, that complicates him. And I want to read an email about Carlos Beltran. This is one opinion, but we like to incorporate you guys listening to the Rico, downloading it wherever you download your podcast. Noah writes, Evan, Carlos Beltran is not an all-time Met. He's just not. He signed a 7-year contract and proceeded to give us only 3 seasons in which he, A, played the whole year, and B, performed at a high level. Those years were from 2006 to 2008. To be fair, those were some very, very good seasons. But I don't think 3 great years make someone a legend, especially when he is associated with so much failure. No, I can't dismiss the final at-bat of the 2006 season. He had been clutch all year, yes, but that's his most iconic moment, and it's one of failure. Nor can I dismiss the fact that 2 of the 3 great seasons coincided with legendary collapses by the team. Beltran had a great career and deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. But he was not a great Met. Of the Mets I've seen in my lifetime, I'd put him below Lindor and Alonso, who already has had more great seasons than Carlos Beltran did. You know, it's tough, man. He makes a lot of good points. Let's quickly go through, though, his seasons as a New York Met, just to be fair on what he did here production-wise. Obviously, I can't deny being defined by the strikeout in 2006. 2005, he played just about every game he played hurt. He underperformed. He is the definition of coming to New York and struggling in your first year. No question about that. 2006 was an unbelievable year. Statistically, his best year as a Met. He was an 8-WAR player, 41 home runs, most as a Met, 116 RBIs, most as a Met, 982 OPS, most as a Met. Unbelievable season. 2007, not quite as good, but 33, 112, 878 OPS, another monster year. 2008 was a better year than 2007. He was a 7-WAR player, played 161 games, 27 home runs, 112 RBIs, 876 OPS. So no question about it. 4 years into his Met career. He's playing all the time. That is without question. Year 1 was an underperformance. 2, 3, and 4 were awesome, awesome seasons. 2009, the year they moved into Citi Field, he was playing great. He was actually having a great year, but missed half of the year. Hit for a career high 325, 10 home runs, 48 RBIs in 81 games with a 915 OPS. So wonderful season, but he missed a big chunk of it. If you take those numbers and you put it over a full season, they're tremendous. 2010, struggled, hurt again, only played 64 games. And then 2011, the year he got traded, was awesome, which led to the trade. Like, he was having such a good year that his value was high enough going into his final year that the Mets did so well in the trade market, they obviously got Zach Wheeler back. So if we are being fair on Carlos Beltran's legacy here, you've got 3 monster years, 1 down year where he played all the time, 1 awesome year but only played half of it, 1 bad year and missed half of it, and then a half of a really good season that actually helped the Mets because it led them to making a pretty good trade for Zach Wheeler. More on him later. It's not just on the surface a Hall of Fame Mets career. And you're right about the team's success. I mean, the team's success in that era is most known for disappointment and failure. It's known for the failures of 07 and 08 and known for the failure of being the best team in the National League in 2006, having a Game 7 in your own building, and finding a way to lose. I can't dispute that. But what I struggle with, and this is where I'll disagree with you, is it is still so special to have a Met in the Hall of Fame wearing the cap. Like, that's the checkmate. The checkmate is you're right about all those numbers. We just went through it and his legacy and how we feel about him and the good and the bad and how it's mixed and how he's not Mike Piazza. That's fine. He is the 3rd guy in the history of a franchise that's been around for more than 60 years. He's only the 3rd guy to have a Met hat being worn as he goes into the Hall of Fame. That is unique. That is special. That is all time. And that's where I lean towards, yeah, you almost have to retire his number. Sorry, Tyrone Taylor. Let's get to Rico item number 5. It involves the TV broadcast, SNY. Number 1, the good from SNY and the bad from SNY. The good is that Keith Hernandez is coming back. And that is good for all of us. There are times in which Keith Hernandez will drive me nuts on a broadcast, but that's like your brother or sister driving you nuts, or even your wife or husband driving you nuts, or your kids driving you nuts. Just because someone drives you nuts and you get mad at them doesn't mean you don't love them. So yes, if you listen to the Rico, there are going to be some Rico, some instant reactions in which I come on, a game I'm not at, And I'm like, oh, when Keith said, blah, 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 it pissed me off. Hey, Keith, if the game's taking so long, just go home. That's out of love. I love Keith Hernandez, and the Met broadcast wouldn't be the same without him. So I am glad that Keith is back. I will give SNY this. If Keith Hernandez decides or Ron Darling decides it's time to walk away, and they have every right to because they've been doing this for a very long time, and they're both awesome. The guys I would eye, number one is David Cone. I'd eye David Cone. I mean, he is a Met as much as he's a Yankee, and I think he's a really good broadcaster. I do. I think at times he bothered me a little bit on ESPN, but when he does Yes with the Yankees, he's great. I think he would be perfect in the SNY booth. And again, he is a Met as much as he's a Yankee. And we don't have a problem stealing former Yankees. So that would be one guy that would jump out at me. But we don't have to worry about that because Keith is back. I know it's a little bit more limited of a schedule, but nevertheless, Keith Hernandez is back is a good thing. Number two, this bothers me, and maybe it's just the Rico audience in early February still listening to this podcast, the diehards, not the ones who are going to jump in when the Mets make a big trade or they open the season. I want every spring training game on TV. I'm going to be blunt, and I say this as someone that had my radio show on SNY, and I have a nice relationship with SNY, and it's wonderful. Love it. Love the people that are there. Sal does a great job. JJ does a great job. I have nothing but love for SNY, and I'm sure even they would admit it. SNY, you're here for one reason. You're here to broadcast Met games. You are not a network without the New York Mets. That doesn't mean that the Carton Show isn't good, or Sal isn't good, or the Jet postgame isn't good. I like a lot of stuff on SNY, but everybody knows without the Mets, it ain't a freaking network. And because of that, air every Met game. I don't care if it's in Jupiter. I don't care if it's in Tampa. Every game should be aired. You're the Mets network. It's spring training. I don't care if only 10,000 people are going to watch it. I'd be pretty confident that more people will watch a spring training Met game than anything else on the network. And again, I mean that with all due respect to the show I used to have there or anyone else. So it bothers me that SNY is cutting down on their spring training schedule. And that's what they're doing. I think they're only airing 13 games this year, which is way too low. Every game should be on. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. I mean, why am I apologizing? And I think every diehard Met fan agrees with that. Every game should be on. Budget restraints, blah, blah, blah. You are here for Mets games. That's why you exist. That's why it was created, for Met games. It wasn't created for Daily News Live. It was created for Met games. Notice I used a show that's not on anymore. All right, what's next? Rico item number 6. Francisco Lindor, for now, is not participating in the World Baseball Classic. Here is a statement on Francisco Lindor's participation in the WBC for Puerto Rico. Quote, due to the cleanup procedure that Francisco Lindor had on his right elbow earlier this offseason, he will not be participating for Team Puerto Rico in the 2026 World Baseball Classic. Francisco is obviously disappointed that he will be unable to participate. However, because of WBC insurance constraints, he is ineligible to play in WBC games. He will participate fully in all spring training activities. I don't have an issue with players in the WBC. Juan Soto, totally fine. Aaron Judge, totally fine. I mean, ideally Nolan McLean would be at spring training, but whatever. I get it. It's an important event for baseball. I like the WBC. I think that you can get hurt in spring training just as much as you can get hurt playing in the World Baseball Classic. I would prefer Francisco Lindor not participate in the WBC. I respect and understand how important this tournament is to him and to a lot of people, but I will give you my reasons for it on why it's a little bit different than everybody else. You are, in many people's eyes, just not Brandon Nimmo's, the captain of the New York Mets. All right? Unofficial or not, you are the captain. You have a brand new locker room, a brand new roster. I think it would benefit the room, a room that has been scrutinized quite a bit for what happened last year. I think it would just be important for you to be around. That's just me. Now, if the insurance policies, because that's why he's not playing, this has nothing to do with anything other than that. There are major insurance issues right now, I'm not going to bore you with, between the WBC and specifically the Puerto Rican team in getting insurance to cover a lot of players. There's even been talk of Puerto Rico pulling out of the WBC. So this is not about anything other than that, which, that's fine. I'm not going to scream and yell if Lindor does it, if they clear this hurdle and he plays. I'm just giving you my opinion. Like, I would prefer him not be there. That's all. Is it a deal breaker if he goes? Am I going to hate Francisco Lindor? No, I understand it's an event he really wants to do. I understand it's an event that's important, but I would put a little bit more stock in Lindor deciding to skip this event, or more importance in Lindor skipping this event versus anyone else. And the reason I don't include Juan Soto in this is because I'm not delusional enough to think Juan Soto is a leader on the New York Mets. He's not. He's a great player. He leads by example. But never, whether it was in Washington, San Diego, the Yankees, or the Mets, has Juan Soto gained a reputation as a guy who's going to have a C on his chest. Lindor has. So if it was up to me, I wouldn't, and this is the way I would handle things, I would not forcefully tell Francisco Lindor not to go if I'm Steve Cohen or David Stearns or Carlos Mendoza. What I would do is appeal to his senses. I would sit him down if they haven't done this and say, look, assuming the insurance stuff is figured out, you have every right to go, and we will support you. Just understand we love you. We get the importance of the WBC, Puerto Rican pride, everything about it. We will not hold this against you. But we would prefer you for this cycle to be around more than any other cycle because of the changes in the room, because of the perceptions of the room, because, yeah, you are coming off an injury, but more than anything, we view you as the leader of the team. And we'd think that even for only 2.5 weeks, it would actually hurt this room to not have you around. With that said, if you disagree, God bless you, go ahead, we'll root you on. So I wouldn't do it forcefully. I wouldn't make this an issue. I wouldn't make this an ultimatum. I would just try to appeal to the senses of leadership. And that's just my view from the outside. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. My gut is the insurance is going to clear him, and he's going to go get to play in the WBC. And there'll be a few people out there not as nice as I am. They won't say, it's up to you, I disagree. They'll say, you're not a leader. Screw you. Anyhow, let's get to Rico item number 7. David Robertson announced his retirement. I'm surprised by that because David Robertson has figured out the Roger Clemens plan, which is I'm not going to sign with anybody. But come July or late June, I'm a hot free agent. And I go to all these teams that are contenders. I get to handpick them and say, hey, watch me throw. I still have it. And I can just jump into a pennant race late in the season. And it sort of makes sense considering the way David Robertson has wore down, or at least the way we saw him wear down at the end of the 2023 season when he was great with us. We trade him away to the Marlins and then he just crumbles. So I think at this age, he probably only has a certain amount of bullets left. So I kind of like that strategy. I think Craig Kimbrell should have tried that strategy instead of, taking his minor league deal with the Mets. But we'll see. Who knows? Maybe he'll end up out of baseball and then come back. I don't hate it. And who knows? David Robertson has every right to change his opinion. And I like it as a fan because when we talked about David back in June last year, what was appealing about it is you didn't have to give anything up. In trading for Ryan Helsley, obviously that was a failure, or trading for Tyler Rogers, there are players that were dealt. These guys are gone. They didn't help the Mets win. So the trade isn't over, but it's over from it being good for us. Those young players could turn into something. And if they turn into anything, those trades look worse. The beauty of signing a guy in the middle of June or July, kind of like the Mets did last year with Brooks Raley, obviously the situation was different because he was coming off of an injury. You don't give anything up. And I prefer that. Anyhow, Rico item number 8. It is an email that I want to read, and it'll lead to a broader topic. And that email is from Jaron from Bridgeport. Jaron writes, what do you think about the Mets adding Paul Goldschmidt to round out the roster? Assuming he's willing to accept a part-time role, he provide much needed late-inning defense and perhaps start 2 to 3 games a week. This would allow Polanco to split DH time with Vientos. Also, this would allow Beatty to just focus on learning how to play left field. Lastly, this would provide a viable backup plan in the event Polanco, Beatty, Vientos doesn't work out at first base. Hoff, I'll ask you. You were big on Eugenio Suarez. Paul Goldschmidt is not the same as Suarez. I want to make that clear. But would that addition make you feel, oh, okay, they added the right-handed bat I wanted?
No, and it's nothing against Paul Goldschmidt in his career. It's just if you saw the tail end of last year, he really faded. He wasn't very good offensively, and his defense wasn't that fantastic where it's like, oh, this is a pure upgrade at first base. I think that he's washed. I think it's time to move on from Paul Goldschmidt.
Here's what's so funny. I completely disagree with you. We're taking reverse opinions with Suarez and Goldschmidt. Now, I'll tell you why. A lot of what you said is very fair, by the way. Watching him every day, we had the chance to do it, obviously, being in a town in which we do watch the Yankees every day, at least we do, for the jobs that we have. Paul Goldschmidt was not great defensively, and I would tell anybody that just watching them every day. He was better than Ben Rice, but there were a lot of scoops he didn't make, and I was like, damn, Goldie usually makes that play. So, agreed his defense was down. B, agreed he faded late in the season. C, absolutely on the table, he's washed. But here's why, despite all that, I disagree with you. Number one, I would bring him in a role that's different than what he had with the Yankees. He is not my everyday first baseman, and I would explain that, kind of like what Jaron said. You are here as, and I would explain this to Goldie, here's your role, here's the way we envision it. You'll probably come in late for defense, especially early, while Polanco and Beatty are learning the position, or if Vientos is over there and he's not good. You're better than all of those guys till proven otherwise. That's number one. Number two, occasionally against lefties, you will also play because you mash left-handed pitching. And also, there is an avenue for you to play more. Jorge Polanco's got an injury history. He just does. It's one of the risks that comes with signing Polanco. There is a way, or Bo Bichette gets hurt. Now Polanco's playing third base. Like, there are ways where you're going to end up playing a lot more. I don't view Goldschmidt as a replacement for Mark Vientos. I think he's very different. And I think if they signed him under the role I just described, defense, late in the game, platoon option, break glass in case of emergency, that is not Mark Vientos. Mark Vientos is just a right-handed masher who's going to DH, who ideally I don't have playing positions. I think Goldie can help fill out this roster, especially defensively, because as you said at the top, you just used it with the wrong guy. Hey, they have no experience at first base. At least Suarez has. Suarez is bad at first base. Despite Goldie taking a step back defensively at first base, he's still a lot better than what they currently have. So I think he rounds out the roster really well, assuming he's good with the role that we're offering him.
Well, here's the thing is I don't think he'll be good with that role. I think he probably wants to get another starting role. And if he was to take a backup role, I feel like he would stick with the Yankees because he's got familiarity over there. If that's
maybe. I mean, that by the way, that's all fair. I have no idea what he wants, what he's willing to accept, the interest level the Yankees have. I'm just saying, like, I can see that role making sense for him. Right now, and we'll do a lot more of this next week as we get ready for spring training, let me just give you a quick synopsis on this roster, just to know how much wiggle room they have. They have 11 guys that are locks, barring injuries, okay? There are 13 spots that will likely be filled by position players. I'm just sticking with position players right now. Usually, you're going to go 13 position players, 13 pitchers, right? You cannot carry more than 13 pitchers. That's just a rule until they expand the rosters late in the season, right? So assuming they go 13 position player, they have 11 locks. I'll tell you them real quick in case anyone wants to dispute them. Alvarez and Torrens, two catchers, they are locks. Bo Bichette, Francisco Lindor, Marcus Semien, Jorge Polanco, Mark Vientos, and Brett Beatty are locks. The outfielders, only three of them. If you want to include Beatty, it's four. Luis Robert Jr., Juan Soto, Tyrone Taylor. If you add that together, that's 11 spots that are just locks. As of right now, the guys who will be competing for those last two spots include the names Jared Young, Nick Morabito, Vidal Brujan, and Ronnie Mauricio. Those are the guys that are on the 40-man roster. Anyone else who would be competing, they're not on the 40-man roster. So Carson Benj is a name that you did not hear. He is not a lock for this roster. If he makes it, then 12 out of 13 are filled. But as of right now, you can see, especially when I tell you those names, Vidal Brujan, is he a lock? I think he's got a chance as like that bat off the bench, that speedster off the bench. Ronnie Mauricio, I have said for a while, I would be surprised if he makes the team barring injury. I think that they're going to season him in the minor leagues. And then, yeah, you got Morabito and you got Jared Young. So Goldie does fit kind of in that mix right there as another infielder, especially if Beatty's going to play a lot of outfield. So there is room, if you just look at that roster I laid out, to possibly add one more minor bat.
And then if you did add Paul Goldschmidt, would you have that question, would he lead off over Juan Soto?
Shut up. You're funny. Let's go to Rico item number 9. On the last edition of the Rico Brogna, we talked about losing free agents and losing beloved free agents. So we talked about the obvious names, all in relation to losing Alonso and losing Diaz. We talked about Zach Wheeler. We talked about Darryl Strawberry. We talked about Jose Reyes. There was one omission. And I'm gonna go both ways on this. I'll take an L but I'll also defend myself on why I didn't include a very pivotal name that the New York Mets lost. And it was a name that they lost that when they lost him, I was very upset. But the reason I didn't include it is because on a technical term, I didn't view him the same way. This player was non-tendered. So he became a free agent and then he went elsewhere. Yes, technically, is that a free agent? Should that have been included in the podcast? That's where I'll take my L and say, you guys are right. I should have brought it up, or at least explained why I'm not including him the way I briefed the whole Tom Seaver situation where they lost him a second time. Was it a free agent? It was a protection thing. It was under an old CBA. Justin Turner was non-tendered. Sandy Alderson made a decision to non-tender Justin Turner. He then proceeded to sign with the LA Dodgers and put together an incredible career. And again, if you're looking at what he did for us compared to what he did specifically in LA, he's now bounced around the last couple of years as a 41-year-old journeyman. But with the New York Mets, he was here for 4 years and at 265 with a 696 OPS. But I liked him. He had great versatility, played all over the diamond, and he would give you rough at-bats. He'd battle for you. He goes to the Dodgers and spent 9 years in LA with a career batting average of 296, 865 OPS, 156 career home runs. He was a 34 WAR player over the 9 years in Los Angeles, which is just, unbelievable. And one thing I should also add is that in 2015, that classic best-of-5 series in which we beat the Dodgers, Justin Turner went a combined 10 for 19 with 6 doubles. That's a 526 batting average. So he then proceeded to torture us in that best-of-5 series. I don't include him because to me it's almost like we released him. Like we just said we're done with him. But I do appreciate all the emails and everyone bringing him up. The mistake I made is I should have mentioned him in that podcast as, hey, decide for yourself. Do you count that as a free agent lost? How do you count that? In my brain, I don't count it as that. I count it as someone they decided to move on from. But neither here nor there. Justin Turner was an unbelievable player, and if the Mets decided to keep him and not non-tender him for some of the dumbest reasons, like they spread rumors that he drank too much. Do you remember that crap? Oh, he goes out and parties too much. Give me a break. Assuming he develops the same way, and I have every reason to believe he would have, things could have been very different. Maybe we win the World Series in 2015. Rico, item number 10. The emails. I got a lot of emails, and we'll do more emails over the next couple of Rico episodes, but I do want to get the people involved. You can always email us, thericob@gmail.com. This is a really good one. Kevin sent an email that on the surface is going to sound dumb, but when you think about it, it's going to make everybody feel uncomfortable. Are you ready? My family and I are in a debate. The claim that Daniel Murphy was a better Met than Jeff McNeil. I disagree. The stats clearly show that Jeff McNeil was the better player, despite Daniel Murphy's heroics in 2015. Your thoughts? So here's what's uncomfortable about this. Everybody loves Daniel Murphy. Like it is just and I do too. I explained it on the Losing Guys We Love edition of the Rico. Same thing about losing Daniel Murphy, how I was wrong. I didn't think he was going to blossom for the next couple of years. He absolutely did. But where our emailer is right is that Jeff McNeil, statistically, okay, and then I'll get into the emotions in a second, statistically is a far better player than Daniel Murphy. And if I asked every Met fan, who do you like more, it's not even close. But here are the numbers. They played a very similar amount of games. McNeil 923, Murphy 903. So what's beautiful about that is the counting numbers can really be compared because they played a very similar amount of games. 20 more games for McNeil versus Murphy. WAR. Flawed stat, fine. Jeff McNeil, 23. Daniel Murphy, 13. Destroys them. Home runs. Jeff McNeil, 80. Daniel Murphy, 62. Fine, neither guy was a home run guy. RBIs, edge for Daniel Murphy, 402 to 367. Batting average, very close. Daniel Murphy, 288. Jeff McNeil, 284. So very similar average. Here's where the split occurs. On-base percentage. McNeil, 351. Murphy, 331. Slugging, basically the same. 428 for McNeil, 424 for Murphy. OPS 779 for McNeil, 755 for Murphy. So 40-point edge for McNeil. OPS plus 117 for Jeff, 109 for Murphy. And the other thing is defensively, they're not on the same planet. You know, Murphy always tried. I appreciate that. Jeff McNeil was a far better defensive player than Daniel Murphy. So the numbers are the numbers. Like Jeff McNeil and Daniel Murphy are, I think, closer than the WAR indicates. But I think the WAR obviously takes a major account into defense where McNeil's been better. But as offensive players, they are similar. Now, what's the difference? Why do we just love Daniel Murphy and dislike Jeff McNeil? I think there were two big reasons. One, the postseason, absolutely. I think he's 100% right about that. Daniel Murphy did something epic. He did something that will always remain warm and fuzzy in our hearts. It was unbelievable. And McNeil never had that. That never occurred with Jeff McNeil. Just didn't. And the second thing is perception and attitude of the player. McNeil had a perception and attitude of he's always pissed off. He's fighting with Lindor. He's throwing his helmet. And while Yankee fans loved it with Paul O'Neill, Met fans never loved it with Jeff McNeil. Daniel Murphy was smiling, was happy, felt like an overachiever, busted his ass on every play. He was just more likable. And sometimes it's as simple as that. So the stats are interesting. And I'd love to hear people's thoughts on that. Jeff McNeil versus Daniel Murphy. I mean, their careers are very similar. They just are. Now, let's hope McNeil doesn't go to Sacramento and put together the 2 years that Daniel Murphy did, because that added, obviously, to Daniel Murphy's, career totals. I just looked at his Met totals. I did not include 16 and 17 for obvious reasons. We're talking about guys as Mets, not what they did elsewhere. But great email and great point. And how about this one? Graham writes, and he brings two Ricos together. I thought it was funny how on the last two episodes of the Rico, it ended with notes on Brody Van Wagenen. At the end of episode 628 on the Edwin Diaz trade, you mentioned how it was a positive mark left by Brody Van Wagenen, and you said thank you. I did. That was only to be followed up by episode 629 on losing players, where in conclusion you decided that the loss of Zach Wheeler by Brody Van Wagenen was far and away the worst loss because how effective he's been since then. Ending two straight episodes with the good and the bad of Brody Van Wagenen had me cracking up. Maybe it begs the question, would you rather have retained Zach Wheeler and never gotten Edwin Diaz, or choose what we know as our reality? Getting Edwin Diaz and losing Zach Wheeler. Thanks, Graham. What a question. Well, number one about the Brody Van Wagenen stuff, that's a perfect example of his tenure here. That if we're being fair, and I always try to do this, whether it's GMs or managers of teams I like versus teams I don't like, I try to take my preconceived notions out. It's like arguing with Tiki about Joe Shane. Yes, I mostly crap on him, but when he does something well, I'm going to say he did it well. I try my hardest to do that. I know we all have biases. I have it too. Brody Van Wagenen did a lot of good and a lot of bad, and that's just the reality. And these last two episodes are great examples of it. The Edwin Diaz trade is one of the great trades in the history of the New York Mets. Not the best of all time, but it's a great trade. No one can dispute that. Letting Zach Wheeler go was one of the worst decisions in the history of the New York Mets. There's no disputing that. So, Hoff, I want your answer on this too. What would you rather have had? The reality we know, Edwin Diaz for the next bunch of years, and Zach in Philly, or the opposite, we never trade for Diaz, and Zach Wheeler is here? My answer is the opposite. I want Zach Wheeler. And my reasoning for that is, yes, the closer's role would have been a major question for the last half decade. I have no idea who the closer would have been. Can't even guess. No idea. But Zach Wheeler was an ace for the last half a decade. And if you're giving me the choice, I guess this is just a baseball question. Would you rather have the best closer in baseball or a top five starter in baseball? And I think that answer would have been easier to answer 20 years ago. I think it's a little bit more complicated in 2026 because guys don't go as deep into games. They don't pitch as often. Totally understand it. But even in 2026, I would take the ace. So given the choice, retaining Zach Wheeler and never getting Edwin Diaz, I would have retained Zach Wheeler. What say you?
I love to disagree with you on everything, but I can't on this. I mean, I'm dying for aces. We've been dying forever. Like the fact that DeGrom left and it hurt so much. I never was as high on Zach Wheeler when like you were. So I probably still would have let him walk. but it definitely hurts. And I would have, if I had the choice to do over, I would take Zach Wheeler any day over Edwin Diaz.
In this alternate universe, this is where we're really going to bring everything together in a hilarious way. If in this alternate universe, Zach Wheeler's a Met, right? And he's putting together like a borderline Hall of Fame career. I don't know if he's a Hall of Famer, but he's not that far off considering what he's done in this era for the last half a decade. If Zach Wheeler was a Met putting up the same numbers, no World Series, let's just say, same kind of success, some down years, playoffs, whatever, would we view the Carlos Beltran trade differently? I'm sorry, not the Carlos Beltran trade, Carlos Beltran differently. Because not only did he have the 6-year, 7-year career with the Mets, there are mixed results, but at the end, he gave us the gift of Zach Wheeler, who career Met, borderline Hall. Like, would that change our view on Beltran if we had the full scope of Zach Wheeler as a Met, yes or no?
Well, I think at the time when we got Zach Wheeler, I think we were excited about it. And we were like, oh, this really is like, it's worth getting rid of Beltran. It's worth the whole thing. So I think that, yes, I think it would have turned much more in his favor that we got rid of that Beltran was a Met. Yeah, of course.
Perception is reality, man. Like the part of Beltran's legacy is unfair, like one at bat or rumors of him preferring to be with the Yankees or whatever. The perception would have been added if, we got Zach Wheeler for him, and he turned into a 15-year career Met who's going to the Hall of Fame. Like that would have been something. Unfortunately, that's not the case. But great question. I'll end it with this email. It's from a 12-year-old, Salvatore, who admitted, "Hi, Evan and Pete. My name is." I'm sorry. You'll see, it's not Salvatore. Hi, Evan and Pete. My name is Andrew. I'm a 12-year-old Met fan using my dad's email. So Andrew is the 12-year-old. He's using his dad Salvatore's email. I respect the hell out of it. So Andrew, if you're listening, I'm going to read your email and we'll respond. What do you think of my Mets lineup? We'll be doing a lot of this over the next month. Soto leads off in right, Lindor batting second at shortstop, Bo Bichette third base batting third, Polanco at DH hitting cleanup, Marcus Semien batting fifth at second base, Brett Beatty batting sixth at first base, Luis Robert Jr. batting seventh and center, Francisco Alvarez behind the plate batting eighth, and Carson Benj batting ninth and playing left field. Vientos DH versus lefties, and Polanco plays first base. Maybe Tyrone Taylor plays left field versus lefties in the start of the season. I don't think Brett Beatty will play left field regularly because I don't see Stern starting with 3 guys in new positions. I could be wrong. Thanks, guys. Love the Rico and love Evan and Tiki. Well, thank you, Andrew. Great email. I agree with a lot of your lineup. I'm a big Soto leadoff guy. Soto, Lindor, Bichette, I think it's fine 1, 2, 3. I go back and forth between Lindor and Bichette 2, 3, but I love Soto leading off, as I've explained. Polanco, Semien 4, 5, no issue with it. My difference would be with Robert Jr. I want to bat him ninth for 2 reasons. Number one, I think it really takes the pressure off. Plus, he gets great protection because the guy batting behind the ninth place hitter is your leadoff hitter. So even if it's not Soto as much as I want, it's Francisco Lindor. Pretty good. So A, I take the pressure off the kid. Not much of a kid, but he's relatively young. B, I give him great protection. And C, him stealing bases makes more sense in front of guys who can drive him in. So I like Robert Jr. batting ninth. Now, you have Benj there. I don't know if Benj makes this team. Obviously, it's on him. It's going to be one of the big storylines of spring training. Again, something we'll get into a lot next week. If Benj is here, I totally get it because it kind of fits the same purpose of what I'm saying with Robert Jr., young player, bat him ninth, take the pressure off. But I'm very intrigued by Robert Jr. batting ninth. But other than that, I love it, especially the Soto leading off part. Email us, the ricob@gmail.com, ricob@gmail.com if you'd like to interact with the pod.
Question, you had history of the Met sandwich picks. Did I screw that up? Did we miss that?
Oh, yeah, I never got to that. You want to get to that real quick?
Yeah, I'd love to. I don't know what that means. Are we talking about food?
So I didn't even realize this, but I was told by a few Met fans, hey, the guy the Mets drafted with the pick they lost for Jacob deGrom is A.J. Ewing. Does that make your opinions kind of change on the deGrom loss? Does it make you more of an A.J. Ewing guy? Like, does that alter anything? And the reality is, it doesn't alter anything, but it will alter history. Like I mentioned on the last Rico, deGrom still has 2 more years left on his deal. Once his contract is up, we'll be able to reevaluate it. And I know we've mentioned before with Mike Hampton that when they lost him, it did turn into David Wright. So a part of losing Mike Hampton is, hey, the pick turns into David Wright. So it doesn't make me a bigger fan of A.J. Ewing. Like, I hope the kid is great. Obviously, he's a Met prospect. But it is worth keeping an eye on, which leads me to answer the question. Can you give me a history of other sandwich picks, other picks where the Mets lost a free agent and then drafted somebody? So would you like to hear a brief history going back the last 25 years?
I would love it.
All right. 1983, first time this happened. It was the only time it happened in the 80s. They lost Pete Falcone as a free agent, and they ended up drafting Calvin Schiraldi, who's more famous in Met history for facing us than obviously being on our team. Darryl Strawberry, this is a big one. When the Mets lost Darryl Strawberry, they used the pick to draft Bobby Jones, who had a fine Mets career, defined by the one-hitter in the game against San Francisco in 2000. So it's not Darryl Strawberry. I don't think it changes the legacy of losing Darryl Strawberry, but we do have to admit, not too bad.
Solid player, of course.
When they lost Frank Viola, they drafted someone named John Ward, okay? When they lost Sid Fernandez, they drafted Jay Payton, who was a top prospect and eventually was a part of the 2000 Mets. When they lost John Olerud in 2000, they drafted Bobby Keppel, who I remember as a reliever. I think he actually made the major leagues, if memory serves correct, but not much there. When they lost Mike Hampton, as we all know, David Wright. When they lost Roberto Hernandez, the reliever, Eddie Coons, who was a big-time relief prospect, never really worked out. When they lost Chad Bradford, they drafted Nathan Vineyard. Okay. When they lost Tommy Glavine, they drafted Bradley Holt in 2008. I vaguely remember him as a pitching prospect, but obviously did not work out. When they lost Pedro Feliciano, they drafted Michael Fulmer, who turned in to the key to the Cespedes trade.
Wow.
How about that?
That's big.
And then finally, I remember this one vividly. When they lost Jose Reyes, it turned into Kevin Plawecki. Kevin Plawecki, the catcher. So
had a decent career.
I mean,
he was around.
So honestly, there you go.
Jay Payton, I think, was probably one of the more successful guys out of there. I mean, he had a decent career. No.
Well, he had a decent career, but I would also say that Bobby Jones really worked out.
Yes.
And but you know what? It kind of proves my point wrong in a lot of ways. Joe B has never said, "Well, when we lost Darryl, we got Bobby Jones, bro." It doesn't. I think we associate it more with Mike Hampton and David Wright because David became an all-time Met than we do with Bobby Jones. So it's worth keeping an eye on. I mean, these are picks that can turn into something, as history shows you. Doesn't mean it will. Doesn't mean the guy is going to be the next great player, but obviously Hampton to David Wright that's a big one. That's
huge.
That's an extreme one. So
I'll take that any day.
and we'll see with A.J. Ewing and Jacob deGrom. I mean, if A.J. Ewing becomes a superstar or a Met franchise player, yeah, that would be kind of crazy to have those two guys linked together. So there you go. We appreciate you downloading the Rico Brogna. You can download it wherever you download your podcast. I mentioned a few more we got for you before spring training. We got the Pete Alonso tribute. Can't wait to do that. We have our rewatchable, last chance to rewatch the game after 9/11. Mets Braves, Mike Piazza home run, and then all the trimmings of spring training and getting ready, and even our trip, which we'll give you more details about. Thank you very much for listening, subscribing, and downloading another edition of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.